We come to Chapter 8 now, which is about controversy with civility. And I want to tell you that I think this may be the hardest principle for people to embrace. And the reason is very simple, is that most of us have been raised to regard controversy and conflict as being something negative and something to be avoided if at all possible. And it turns out that with regard to social change, that controversy, which you will see is distinct and separate from conflict, but that controversy is an essential part of the process. And that is, if it's done with civility, that it actually makes for a better process. And that's a real mind shift for most people. And so if you find yourself struggling with this a little bit at first, it's perfectly understandable, but just hang in there and let's walk through and let me see if I can explain to you the type of controversy that's actually healthy for the change. So first what we'll do is we'll talk about the difference between conflict and controversy with civility and make sure we understand the difference between those two. And then I want to talk about the positive value of controversy to the change process, and then talk about how our own personal values and attitudes and behaviors affect this process of controversy with civility. So what is controversy? Well, first, let me lay a little foundation here. Remember that in this course, what I've said so far is that social issues and their solutions are complex, and therefore they require a diverse group of people to solve. Okay. Well, anytime a diverse group of people together, they're going to have different perspectives. So controversy refers to the disagreements and disputes which arise when you have people with just contrasting perspectives put in a situation where they're encouraged to share those differing perspectives. But the distinction here is that we're going to insist that they be shared in a civil way so that it's actually a safe and healthy environment for sharing these different perspectives. But the fundamental assumption here is that the only way to find real, lasting solutions to social issues is to have a diverse group of people who almost by definition are going to bring these diverse perspectives, sometimes which may be totally at odds with each other. But we have to create an environment where it's safe and actually desirable for people to share these differing perspectives. The way we're using the word here, controversy here, though, is distinct and different from the word conflict. The two are not synonymous in our usage in this chapter. Conflict typically has two opposing sides, and it's a win-lose situation. That is, each side tries to win the other one over to their point of view. Controversy, on the other hand, starts out looking pretty similar, looking kind of similar, where you have these different groups with differing opinions or different ideas about something. But differs in this fundamental way is instead of one group trying to win the other one over so one group winning, the other group losing, is that each group is trying to understand the issue from everyone's perspective. So in that sense, everybody grows and learns and ends up in a new place rather than one winning and one losing. So it's a win-win situation. So when you look around organizations and groups, we tend to see three basic approaches to controversy and conflict. The first one that I mentioned in the beginning is the notion that we should all be trying to maintain civility by avoiding controversy. This is kind of a go along and shut up type culture. Now, on the surface, this looks like something good because people aren't at odds with each other. But what we know is that when it comes to complex problem solving, that unless people feel free to express differing ideas, you develop something that we call groupthink. And groupthink is terrible. It works for a little while, perhaps, but in the long run, it ultimately usually gets organizations and groups into trouble because they become blind to all kinds of differing perspectives that they really need to be considering. Now, the second approach is to embrace controversy. And you see organizations say, "Oh, we need to speak out. We need to speak our minds. We need to say we have differing opinions when we do differ," and so forth. But they don't put the value in of doing it with civility. And so differences of opinion become almost fights and arguments, and people who have different opinions are maybe seen as being less smart or having a character flaw. And so it's a very raucous environment where people are disagreeing. So we're halfway there, but they're not doing it in a respectful sort of way. Now, what we're after is the third, to promote controversy with civility, so that group members really feel safe to express the different opinions, and they're respected for doing so. You know, this is the difference between folks when you hear something totally different than the way you see something. You know, let's say you're in a group meeting and you express one opinion, somebody throws another opinion out there that's just diametrically opposed to yours. Instead of starting to fight them and say, "Oh, you're crazy. What are you doing? You know, how could you see things that way?" and so forth. It's to say, wow, wonder, I didn't think of it that way. Well, what can I learn from this? Why do they have that different perspective? And is it possible that my perspective, my opinion, is too narrow-minded? Maybe if we put the two together, we end up in a better place. Your book talks about 5 pillars, if you will, of developing the ability to promote controversy with civility. And I want to talk about each of these for a moment. First is an awareness of one's own worldview. You know, all of us are shaped by our life experiences up to the current time. And our view of any issue, of any idea, any opinion, is shaped by those experiences. It's that simple. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But there's a big difference between a person who thinks they're right because of those experiences and a person who understands that their experiences have shaped them in one way that is probably quite different than other people may have been shaped. And so your schools, your ethnicity, your race, your church, your family values, all of those things have shaped your view of the world. The more as we talked in the cultural intelligence book, the more you travel, the more you get engaged with people from other parts of the world, from diverse parts of even our own country, the more you realize that your view is just one of those views. You know, I'll tell you a little funny story here. When I was finished my master's program, I really thought I was getting to be pretty smart. And I really thought, well, if I got a doctorate, then I'll really be on top of things. Well, you know what a doctorate really taught me is how much I didn't know, and how much I had been shaped by my own life experiences, and how many different worldviews there were out there. And so it really taught me to respect the diversity of worldviews that you come into contact with. And so I will promise you that if you really get engaged in social change, that you're going to encounter these differing perspectives. And if you don't start out recognizing the limitations of your own, then you really struggle. I mean, for example, I was raised in a typical white, middle-class sort of way. I was sent to private school for high school and went on to college at Virginia Tech. So, you know, I started out life with a pretty narrow view of the world, that of a white middle class, college educated professional. Now, it took me a while in life to start to really understand how different a worldview that gave me. And each of you is in the same position. So I think you have to, what I'm challenging you to do is to think about this and realize that all of your ideas and opinions are very valid, but they come from a biased worldview. And so you need to be open to other worldviews. And that's the second pillar, an awareness of others. And you need to be open to those without rejecting them outright. Doesn't mean you have to adopt that worldview, but it does mean you have to appreciate what it brings to the process. The third pillar is building trust. That your job as a leader is to create an environment where people trust that they're free to share their differing worldviews. If people don't feel a sense of trust, then they're going to clam up and they won't share it. And if they don't share it, they won't feel ownership over the goals and aims of the group. And the end result is you don't get the change that you want. So your job is to create an environment where every opinion and idea is respected, where people treat each other with integrity, and people can trust that it's safe to share those worldviews. The fourth pillar is to identify the roots of the controversy. That is to get past what we call the positions and get down to the interests of each party. What do I mean by that? You can think of controversy as a type of negotiation. And you might remember we talked a little bit in 3723 about win-win negotiation. And win-win negotiation takes place when you don't focus on what the position that's being asked for, but rather you dig a little deeper and find out what the other party is really concerned about. So let's go back to a program to fight poverty, among the elderly. And one person might start out saying, I want Meals on Wheels to be funded at 10 times the level it is right now. That's a position. Okay? Now, if you peel back the layers on that and say, well, what is it that you're really you're concerned about and you're really trying to do here? Well, the answer is I'm trying to get meals in the hands of of these senior citizens. Well, that we can come to agreement around. Whether Meals on Wheels is the right program to do that or not could be much more debatable. But we can agree around the root of that, what we call an interest. Because even if you bring diverse people together, we may all have that same interest to solve the hunger problem. We have different ideas about how to make it happen, but we all agree that that's what we're trying to do. That's our core interest. Last but not least is fostering dialogue. That you as a leader need to, if you've created this safe environment where people can disagree, is that it's important that people talk it out. And your job is to foster that ongoing dialogue around everybody's differing interests until you can come together on an action. Let's take a little closer look at this notion of creating trust in an organization. Your book offers 5 tips for that, and I want to highlight just a couple of them. First, right in the middle, is create a climate of predictability. And what they mean by this is that people can trust that others will react in a predictable way when they offer differing ideas and opinions. And that predictable way, of course, is one that's respectful of those different opinions. The fourth point is to make sure everybody has a voice in planning and problem solving. Don't do things behind closed doors. Closed door decision making breeds distrust in the organization. And last but not least is that you have to start out by trusting others. One of the best ways to create trust in the organization is to give trust. Trust other people, and expect the same from them in return. And if you demonstrate that as a leader, you'll go a long way to creating that kind of culture in your group or in your organization. Let me expand for a moment on this notion of dialogue, and particularly how a dialogue differs from a debate. A debate goes along with conflict. You have opposing sides, each trying to show the other side why they're wrong. And of course, the goal is to win the argument. So people who are engaged in a debate defend their positions and constantly challenge the other point of view. In a dialogue, on the other hand, each differing point of view is engaged in order to try and understand the issue better. And the goal is not to win. The goal is for everybody to increase their understanding of the issue by taking all the perspectives into account. And the individuals who are engaged in the dialogue are open to having their assumptions challenged and using other people's way of thinking to improve their own understanding and their own thinking. So you can see fundamentally how different the processes are that surround conflict versus controversy. Controversy is healthy if we create the right process to manage it. Controversy will lead us to better solutions, whereas debate and conflict do. This slide talks a little bit about what this would look like in practice. Let's suppose that I'm pulling a group together to engage in some kind of action planning to address a particular social issue. Let's suppose we're talking about the mental health of underprivileged children. Well, stage one, I have to allow time for people in the room to get to know each other and build at least some kind of relationship. Because if you just take a group of people, put them in the room, and try and have a dialogue, and they don't know each other, there won't be any trust, and it'll fall flat. So we would usually create some kind of a little bit of a social event around it so people could kind of feel more comfortable. Stage 2 is often a sharing process where the members of the group share their backgrounds and their experiences and their values, just so everybody gets to know each other a little bit more. And it's not till stage 3 that we really get into the controversial stuff, where group members start to dialogue about controversial topics and issues and start to voice their perspectives, meaning their ideas and their opinions. And then the artful part of it as a facilitator is that to get it to stage 4, where based on the whole group's understanding, the group works together to create an action plan. You wonder, is this just nirvana? Is this something that is impossible to do? No, the answer is it happens a lot. And it happens a lot because of that shared purpose. Remember, we have a common purpose. And usually in social change, that purpose is very powerful. We have people in need of something, and we're trying to fix problems. And that common purpose that unites the people in the room will usually overcome any of those selfish tendencies to want to guard their own agendas.